a very good afternoon to you all. We are pleased to introduce our presenting team and webinar, The Future of Skills, Future-Proofing Our Skills and Talents. Our first speaker is Damien. Over to you, Damien.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us. We've got a great turnout yet again for this really interesting and very apt topic, given the current position on the on skills in the workplace. So my name is Damien Shevlin. I'm the HR Director for Northern Europe and UK and Ireland at Atos, and I'm delighted to be joined by a number of our clients today from across a variety of different industries, and it's really interesting to hear from such different industries and different clients and different individuals on this really interesting topic. They're going to share their insights and their perspectives, so I think it's going to be a fantastic session. So this session today forms part of a number of activities that Atos is leading as part of our Digital Society work. So the Digital Society, just to remind everybody, is an Atos thought leadership series bringing to life how digital technologies are reshaping society in a number of ways. So we examine the impact of digital technology in 6 distinct areas: productivity, innovation, ethics of AI, future skills, sustainability, and digital infrastructure. So it's a really fascinating topic and some great work that's been done through this year. So I'm really proud and delighted actually to be the executive sponsor of the skills stream of Digital Society. And over the course of this year, we've been exploring digital skills through various means, including blogs. And the brilliant Cheryl Allen has put out a number of blogs on this topic, so please do look out for those. Expert panels like this one today. We held another really interesting discussion with a panel a couple of months ago, and we got some fantastic feedback. And I'm sure the one today will be even bigger and better, no pressure panelists. But in all seriousness, there are you can listen back to the session that we did a couple of months ago on atos.net, and this session will also be recorded and available for everybody to watch back as well. We've done lots of research and lots of discussions on the topic today, so it's a really important topic for our organization at Atos, but most other organizations as well. So today I'm joined by 3 of our clients, as I mentioned. They're going to share some experiences of skills transformation within their organizations, and it's such a diverse range of organizations we've got for you today. So we've got Emily McConnell from Sellafield Limited, we've got Nisar Kirani from Scottish Water, and Colonel Mark Cornell from the Army Digital Services MOD. So what I'm going to do to start, I'm going to ask Emily, Nisar and Mark to introduce themselves in a little more detail and far better than I can do, and then we'll go into the discussion itself. So Emily, would you like to start?
Yeah, of course. Thanks very much, Damien. So Emily McDonald, so I'm Head of Resourcing at Sellafield Limited. So we are an organisation that deals with nuclear sites. So we're based across 2 locations, West Cumbria and Warrington in Cheshire. We employ 11,000 permanent employees, and then we have a supply chain and contingent workforce that sits alongside that. So a big organisation, an organisation that's going through significant change and transformation, and lots of skills challenges obviously arising from that. So pleasure to be here.
Fantastic, thanks Emily. Nisar, could you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, Mark. So good afternoon, I'm Nisar Kirani from Scottish Water. I think one correction, it says meet the expert. I certainly don't class myself as an expert. I'm learning as well. So that's correction. Scottish Water, we look after all of the water and wastewater infrastructure for Scotland, which is looking after clean water and dealing with all of the sewage. It's largest organization, about 4,500 people, but a huge amount of supply chain which supports us across Scotland. In regards to transformation, we're moving out of the regulatory period to really look at a 20-year transformation journey. When you talk about sustainability, it needs to be a long-term transformation, and that's the dilemma we're grappling with, learning with. That's me. In terms of me, I'm an engineer, through and through. Still learning people's skills as I go.
Very good. Thank you, and thanks for joining us. Colonel Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Chopsy Cornell. So I run Army Digital Services, supporting the delivery of both applications and analytics tools to the broader Army. So where there's a bespoke requirement, we will deliver that on behalf of the Army. But we also support wider defence as well. We have the Army data warehouse where we do lots of our data analytics. So data analytics dashboards that we deliver to the business for BI and MI. And I run a mixed economy team of military, civil servants and contractor experts that come in to support that, to a team of about 150. Why this is important to us at the moment, the Army is just embarking on its digitalization program, which is how it really digitally transforms. And as much as a technology program, it is actually probably more of a cultural and behavior program. And therefore people and those people skills are absolutely key for our delivering of that sort of Army-wide program.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, and thanks to all three of you for joining us today. So I think it's going to be a great discussion. So let's get into it. So I'm going to start, Emily. I'm going to ask you this question, then I'm going to come to you, Nisarg and Mark. So I think it's fair to say that the skills landscape has certainly been fast evolving over recent years, and for me, I think it's speeding up. Thinking about the impact of technology, automation, data savviness, and certainly social changes, and potentially political changes you could throw into that as well. So Emily, from your perspective, how have the skills you require as a business at Sellafield changed, thinking about the volume of skills and the type of skills?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's probably important from a context perspective just to sort of put in place where we are at Sellafield. So we're on a journey in terms of the types of skills that we need in the organisation, but we're also looking at that against a backdrop of getting the most value for money, recognising that we're government funded. So we're looking at a reducing overall workforce size whilst developing a different skills profile that sits within that. So I guess we've got the challenge twofold really. In terms of the change of skills that we're seeing arising across our workforce, I think it's fair to say that digitalisation and technology presents a massive opportunity for us. And it goes down to examples of roles no longer being done by hands-on operators and instead being done by robots, and all of the things that come with that in terms of the skills that you then need for the people operating that machinery. And we're seeing quite a lot, interestingly, of young people adapting to that workplace where they've been used to a life of computer games and they get to do real things now with them. So it's right across the organisation. I don't think you could say that any part of it is not touched by these changes. And I think for me, it looks into sort of hard skills and everybody having sort of a basis of digital skill and so on and so forth, and then into some of the softer skills that's required. So for us, we're moving away from some quite routine activities into a lot more complex problem solving. And so I think for me, it's important that we're balancing both of those out. But I don't think there's a single part of our organisation that's not going through a change in the skills it needs for the next decade.
I mean, that's fascinating. You touched on robots, and it's something we read a lot about in the press, and we clearly see evolving and developing in lots of organisations. Replacing those hands-on operators, and you talked about the younger generations being interested in this space. Have you seen that in, let's say, the graduates, maybe apprentices that you're bringing into the organisation as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are a lot more innovative in the ways that they're seeing these problems in the organisation, and you see that particularly, I think, with our graduate cohorts. We take about 50 to 80 graduates in our organisation each year, about 100 plus apprentices. So that's one of our key pipelines in, but you definitely see a growth within them of thinking differently about the way we do things, and really provide our job to provide the environment for them to have that platform to do that.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm going to come on a question later, Emily, around the balance between the skills acquisition externally to the organisation and the development internally. And I think a lot of what you just talked about will feed nicely into that question. So I won't spoil that one for now. So thanks, Emily. So Nisarg?
So from my vantage point, I think everything Emily said is true for us as well. But if I look at the kind of the two separate segments, in terms of a lot of work we do out on the ground, fixing pipes or repairing stuff, etc., there it's a question of learning new skills. So the way, if I could use kind of numeracy and literacy being the basic skill, now digital is turning into basic digital skill as well. So how do we increase that core skill cohort, where it has an additive effect rather than just taking the old jobs away and putting just robots doing things. We've not yet reached there. And that may not be case for a long time to come as we run through. But the digital is now changing the way they do things. They're still doing the same job, but their toolbox now has got a far bigger digital footprint than what you used to have. The way they do jobs, they're changing. The things which will be changing is everything then underneath in terms of how do we organize work, how do we work through. So robots as in not physical manifestation, which everyone reads a lot, but a manifestation in the decision making and who does what and how things happen. And that's where this technology is now really getting in with analytics and data science and all of that domains. We're building a lot of capabilities in that space. And then the decision making, which is at the upper end of in terms of how do you make decision, and gut versus data, gut versus insights, and kind of what I believe versus what's going to happen. So kind of these changes happening across all three dimensions in terms of how do we organize work, how do we work, and how do we make decision about work. Digital is impacting all three aspects in a rapidly different way. But it's quite exciting for most folks, because this is giving them an ability to solve problem differently. It's raising some new complex problems, some problem on ethical grounds and other things, and that's something I think would require a lot deeper conversation. But that's where we are.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Nisarg. So you talked about I guess the decision making, the gut versus the data. What kind of softer skills, and Emily touched upon the softer skills as well, that complement some of the new digital skills we need in the workplace. So what softer skills are you looking for in Scottish Water to complement that digital piece?
I think that is first and foremost, I don't think data is panacea to everything. Data is really important, but it still requires the human intellect, putting things in context, recognizing, understanding risks differently than what would have been in the past. The scenario planning, complex problem solving, because sometimes too much data might just lead to paralysis to say, so how do I make a decision? I've got 500 things in front of me. Does that mean I do something or not? So a lot more acute decision-making skills, where in past they just went with their guts. Now they've got a few other touch points. And at times with all of this technology, etc., people think the human contact and the ability to work with each other is not needed. It still needs that. I think that need is not taken away. In fact, it's become more acute as we work through with a lot of data in terms of how do we solve conflict? How do we work with each other better across complex processes? Now, we do have some complex processes compared to Mark and Emily. Our complexity might not be as much as running a nuclear power plant, but nevertheless, there are complexity. And how does the process run end to end? And how do people interact with each other on a journey is something we are looking at.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned at the start around robots, and you're saying at the moment it's more additive. It's not a straight replacement, which I think Emily had probably gone up slightly further on and said there is more of a direct replacement of people. in some of the work that's done at Sellafield. Just thinking, we see a lot in the press around the use of drones. Is that something that you're looking at or using at the moment in Scottish Water?
So just point on robots. What I meant by the frontline jobs, people who do the work where robot technology has been additive. All of the back office function technology is certainly replacing some of the stuff people did before, but it's finding new things as well. With regard to drone, we're running a number of proof of concept pilots to see how it works, where it helps out. And for things like lens survey and other things, we're certainly using it because it is the best way of getting the lens service done, right? In terms of day-to-day work, there's certainly a number of POCs going on to see how that's going to change the way we work.
Very good. Really interesting. Thank you. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Really interesting listening to to Emily and this art. We in the public sector, I think probably in terms of those digital skill sets that we're looking to bring in, there's a two-track approach. I think in terms of the general population that we have, so we have a really diverse age range and skill set. So you have young soldiers coming in from school who are that digital generation, want to do everything on their tablet and their phone, to a much older generation of senior officers and civil servants who have been in probably been in the organisation for 30, 40 years, seen lots of change, and maybe resistant to doing some of those things in a new digital way. Interesting, you talk about robots. We're starting to understand and utilise robotic process automation to automate more of those mandrolic type activities, so we can move the individual further up the value chain in terms of what they bring to the business. I think, and so there's a whole element of how do we digitally upskill the workforce, be it in the business space here in the UK or in the operational space when we're deployed overseas, because ultimately what we're seeing is a huge demand by our commanders and decision makers for data and dashboards to make better decisions, more timely decisions based on real evidence and underlying data, rather than probably what we had was based on experience and that gut feeling. So so there's a whole level of digital upskilling that needs to happen within the organisation, and I think you've got your younger people who are readily accepting of that, your older people who may be a bit reticent, and it's how we move all of those people as a group up the value chain so we can deliver better. I think the second pillar that I'm talking about is those digital professionals. I rely hugely at the moment on the contractor market. But what we're trying to do is start to, we recognised that a number of years ago. So we have our graduate fast stream, digital fast stream projects. We have our digital apprentices, and I've got 4 digital apprentices working with me at the moment. And what we're trying to do is build up our own internal expertise, so we're not so reliant on the contractor market. I think, if I'm honest, it will always be a mixed economy. But what we've got, I think what that is now starting to challenge is perhaps how we recompense our people. Traditionally in the public sector, military or civil service, we recompense our people on how many people they manage, not necessarily the skills they bring to the organisation. And therefore, I think what we're seeing now is how do we recompense those people appropriately to keep them, because they like the work, they really like the work, but they all say, but I could go out and be a contractor and earn this much more. How do we make that balance so we keep those people, we've got interesting work for them to do, and keep them and give them a career profile throughout the organisation? And there's a number of activities going on with the digital stream, building that, how we bring those lateral entry people in, as well as bringing people in from the bottom. And so I very much see it as a parallel but two-strand approach, for the general digital upskilling of our people, so they can properly embrace digital ways of working, but also those digital professionals, in order that we deliver the tools and techniques for that general population to be more optimal in its working.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating, and 3 similar answers with patterns throughout, but certainly incredibly different because of the makeup of the organisations that you're representing. So fascinating. Mark, I was just thinking about the retention of people with these fantastic, future skills, digital skills, and you talked about recompensing appropriately. Do you, and only what you can share, of course, but are there any I guess unique ways that you're looking to retain and potentially attract from a recompense perspective?
So I think the public sector offers a broader package, and whether you're a civil servant or in the military, obviously the pension and things like that are attractive. I think they offer a really interesting ability to go into areas that you probably won't see elsewhere out in industry necessarily. And so that's attractive. But I also think they are now looking at how do they maybe decouple a technical stream and a managerial stream in terms of those the financial piece of that, and by adding, we've had within the Hydrographic Office, which is a trading fund within the MOD itself, they had the ability to set the grade level for certain digital skilled people to come in, but also had the ability to add a up to a £10,000 retention and a recruitment bonus onto them. So what was interesting was we were seeing actually probably people in their late 30s, from the Bristol digital sort of environment, who'd been contracting for a number of years, who was now settling down with young families. Actually, they liked the idea of a bit more job security, where they weren't bouncing between jobs on a 6, 12 or 18-month basis, and they were prepared to take the drop in the overall salary because the package that they were offering was good enough, and that's where we need to be in that competitive part. We're not going to pay people more than what the contractor market pays, but what it is a whole package that we're offering. I think it can still be really attractive.
Fantastic, really good insight. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to move on to onto a new area of discussion, and we clearly couldn't have any panel discussion on any topic without talking about COVID. So what I'm interested in is the COVID impact or the COVID effect on your organisations. Thinking about how you acquire skills, how that may have changed, and also the type of skills you may need. I'm seeing a lot more agile decision making generally, and I wonder again if this has changed, if COVID has changed the speed of your skills transformation plans when you look out to the future. So Nisarg, do you want to start? Sure.
So I think, has COVID changed? I think the answer to that is very simple. Yes. If I look at digital change first, in terms of what used to take us months, teams are now producing that in weeks. We had to get the entire business digitally mobilized, everyone working from home, etc., in a matter of 2 weeks, and we were able to do it for all of our employees, and immensely proud of it. And if anyone from Atos team is on this call, a sincere thank you on behalf of leadership to help us achieve that. I know you guys were instrumental in the process. So there has been a lot of changes, and certainly even if I look at the frequency of conversation has changed. The leadership team meeting, which used to take place once a month, sometimes it's now once a week. We used to take once a week, has turned into daily stand-up calls. So things have moved rapidly from that perspective. With regard to skill, as I've said, I've run the transformation program, and my colleagues who work in people directorate will look at skills in more detail. Our immediate reaction is a bit tactical. We are working through it in terms of the long-term ramification of this on skills. The changes to skill set are more driven pre-COVID, and COVID has just heightened the need for digital. than what was before. It hasn't changed. It's just given an adrenal jab to the need for digital, because we had no other option to work this way. But in long term, the space question has been kind of, and this is what I said in terms of my previous response, the ethical dilemma. They will have to be mindful of this rapid pace, and people are coming out of it. And as this continues, this is one of the many unfortunate events we'll have to live with in the future. With climate change emergency coming in, as much as pains me to say, every forecast I read says this is the first pandemic I got used to in my life, not the last. And something needs to be, we as society would have to readjust to the pace. There's a risk that we might burn out as we just continue that what used to take place in a year now gets done in months and weeks and days. So I see some sort of balancing act which we now need to do with the pace. As we kind of start learning to sustain with COVID, it's no longer just 4 months, 5 months, 6 months thing. Scotland just announced some new restrictions yesterday. I don't know, England might announce something today. Well, that change needs to come. But apart from pace, what it has done is made us immensely adaptive. And all of us have talked about adaptation for so many times in our life, but it's the first time I believe this sort of adaptation was needed to everything I did as an individual and everything my team did. And that's the fundamental shift to the skill set in addition to pace. Pace is just, and Mark, you would know, and Emily, you would know as well, we're used to dealing with emergencies, and an emergency, a new organization comes in and it just takes over and it just knows how to do emergencies. But emergencies tended to be short, tended to be confined to one unit. It's the first time it is an emergency which is really long and it confines to everything we do. So the space is brilliant, but I don't think it's sustainable the same way forever. Adaptability is something we'll have to learn, but it'll be faster, definitely faster than what was before.
Yeah, great answer. And you told me you weren't an expert, Nisarg. That was a great answer. I love the point on adaptability and readjusting to the pace of the changes. I think it's a really, really good point. Emily, over to you.
Yeah, I guess I would echo a lot of what Nisarg said around that pace, but also around that piece of we've been careful not to call it new normal, because who knows what normal is anymore, but whatever the environment is in the future, and that longevity of what we see ahead of us, really. I think the only thing I'd add to it is there's probably two areas quite pertinent to Sellafield that's come through in this recent environment. The first, I think, is it's testing our leaders and the skills that they have as leaders to lead virtually. That is very different to how we have sort of born and bred leaders in our organisation, different environment. And I think people are adapting at different speeds to that, but we've got to, as an organisation, we need to respond and help them work out their way through that. And then I guess the other piece that it's really highlighted for us is we've got lots of generations in the workforce, and there's a very practical piece around us knowing the complement of people's skills that exist within the organisation, and being able to then effectively really deploy people across our organisation. So really getting that agility. As Nisarg said, we're very good in a crisis or in an emergency, and we were able to get everybody effectively working from home, and the majority of people utilised. But as we start to then really harness the opportunity that COVID's presented, I think one of the things for us is to really get under the skin of what skills exist across our organisation, and moving away from the typical, this is someone's training, this is someone's qualifications, to what are people's full complement of skills and where are they going to best serve us in the future. So there's two quite specifics, I guess, for us, and it's broken down the fact that we're in Cumbria, and who wants to come to Cumbria to work? So we've become a little bit more location agnostic in that sense. So maybe we will be able to attract some of those hard to reach skills for digital in the future, because Cumbria is no longer a barrier.
Yeah. Well, Cumbria is a lovely place anyway. So yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Emily. Just in the interest of time, Mark, I'm going to fire straight to you, please, on this topic.
Yeah, so very similar, to what the other guys saying. I think for us, it's sped up the adoption of our digital ways of working significantly. We've been working with Office 365 for 3 or 4 years. We probably moved ahead more in the last 6 months with the adoptions of Teams and things like that, because people had to. Moving from working in the office to working from home overnight. First of all, we had to enable everyone to be able to do that, because we'd never seen that as a business continuity issue that was going to happen. So lots of business continuity plans got renewed, but I think people have managed to adopt those digital solutions at their fingertips because they were forced to. Previously, although we had Skype and sort of Teams to collaborate, people would still invariably hold face-to-face meetings or voice teleconference meetings. And all of a sudden now it's all about VTCs. It's all about, we don't need to do it. And I think for the hierarchy, it slayed some of those sacred cows that we had to come into the office. You had to have your face-to-face meetings. We've been pretty successful. My organisation, we continue to deliver. We're an agile organisation, deliver on a regular cadence anyway. Lockdown didn't stop that. We carried on delivering. There was no change to our output. So I think there's an idea. There is definitely an idea now that the flexibility that mobile working brings, adds to the organisation, not necessarily detracts it, and that changes some of those. The British Army and the MOD are traditional and conservative with a small c by nature. I think what we're starting to see is some of those real behaviour and cultural changes now that need to happen if we are truly going to embrace a digital transformation. For me, it's how you keep those going post-COVID, because there will be a tendency to slip back into the old ways of working. Though I think people are so used to doing this now. I think they will want to come into the office a little bit more, but actually they won't see that need to be in there 5 days a week, like they were before. And I think that's, to me, has been the fundamental change out of that. I think the other driver that we've seen is this idea now, particularly from the younger soldiers, and that is that I need to be able to do it on my own device. It's not about having a corporate device necessarily. I need to have access to particularly those basic administrative services and human resources services online on my own device. And how we move those big enterprise back-end systems within the corporate piece and deliver that functionality out onto the internet so people can do that, I think is giving us some really interesting challenges, but we're doing it. We've just rolled out the ability for people to submit expenses online, where previously they would have had to log on to the corporate system, go to a specific application in that corporate system and do that. Well, we've now done that, and we did that in 6 weeks. And so it can be done. And of course, people, we traditionally work with big SIs and primes, and if we go to them, they'd say, oh yeah, we can do that. 2-3 years for us to deliver that. Well, we've done it in 6 weeks, and it just shows you what can be delivered. And I think so the pandemic in that way has acted as a huge catalyst for the adoption of smarter ways of working, digital ways of working.
Fantastic. Yeah, fascinating. It is amazing what can be done when you really have to, isn't it? Thank you very much. Really, really interesting and great answers on that particular topic. So I'm going to move on to the next one, again, in the interest of time, because I'm keen to leave some time for Q&A at the end, because we're getting a lot of questions in, which is fantastic. So I'm now going to ask you about your transformational journeys and what next, but if you could also build into your answer, thinking about the balance between hiring externally, and I touched upon this earlier as part of Emily's first answer. So the balance of hiring externally and also developing your own people through reskilling. So if you could give us an answer on that, and then talk about what next in terms of your transformational journey. So Emily, could I jump to you, please?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of skills acquisition moving forward, we'll continue with a blended approach, which we've had for a number of years now, but with a slightly different focus on which approach we might use for which skill set, if that makes sense. So as I said before, we bring a large volume of trainee, apprentice and graduates into our organisation on an annual basis. We'll continue with a strong focus on STEM subjects in that area, because we've found success in growing our own there. We've also had a big reskilling and upskilling agenda, and specifically on the reskilling, we've had strong success in reskilling people from a skill area or capability into project management skills, where we've had a big requirement. So we've set up our own internal sort of project academy where we've done that. I think the next evolution of that is to see where that type of approach will work for other capabilities, other skills, and I think IT, digital is one of those where we'd look to branch that out into. So I think we'll continue with that, and then we'll obviously bring some experienced direct hires in where we can, just to complement, as I said before, the demographic of our workforce. We've got big populations at the front end of their careers who have coming through those apprentice and graduate routes, but then because of how our hiring patterns have been over years, we've also got a big demographic towards the end of their careers where they might be looking at, at going and enjoying a more peaceful life. So we've got somewhere in the middle where we'll need to bolster with some experience. And so I think that's where we'll be with skills acquisition. In terms of what next for us, the key for me really is taking of an organisation of the size we are and recognising those different generations. It's going to be continuing to take people on this journey with us. We haven't been met with a huge resistance on reskilling people, retraining people. People are up for learning new things, but it's really keeping them engaged in that and being really clear, I think, about what those opportunities look like and what the future of work looks like for people. So I think our biggest challenge is that engagement and that communication in our organisation.
Yeah, very good. Really interesting. And just thinking about the strategies in Sellafield, I know you have plans that stretch out a good number of years ahead. Is that impacting the skills transformation journey, and how does it link into those longer term plans?
Yeah, I think you're right. We've got a business that's going to run for at least 100 years, so that sometimes can make you a little bit passive and maybe not work at the pace that would be. So I think back to the point before, we've seen something very different during the pandemic, and we've seen what can be done in shorter time frames, and if we really put all our shoulder behind it and get over a line. So I actually think we're probably now in our change and in our transformation going to work at a different pace to what we were working at pre-pandemic. But yeah, it still doesn't help that you've got such a long future ahead of you. Sometimes you can sit a little bit idle if you're not careful.
Yeah, indeed. Really interesting. Thank you. Thanks, Emily. Mark, over to you on this topic, please.
Yeah, so for us, I think what we're seeing now is a definite change in trying to rebalance the between outsourcing and insourcing of those digital skills that we need. A blended approach, very similar to Emily's, but I see a lot more increase in terms of recruitment at the bottom. But also we're seeing things where, in the military at the moment, if you're a soldier or if you're an officer, you finish your career at 40, 42, or 50 and 55, and then you're kicked out. Well, actually, you've got a bunch of skills there. So how about transferring those skills, maybe no longer wearing uniform, but becoming a civil servant within the MOD and doing that specialism with it, whether in the digital technical area. So we're seeing lots more of that type of activity happening, and this idea that we do need to bring our own indigenous skills in and up there. I think for us, as we go on our digitalization program, the people pillar remains fundamental. I think, and that's a real change in approach for the MOD, where people look at digitalization and say, oh, it's technology, let's throw it over to the IT department because it's theirs. It's not about that. It's about people. It's about culture. It's about behaviours. Yeah, we are very, as I said, a traditional organisation, a conservative organisation, very hierarchical in structure. What we're seeing now is that information and data doesn't abide by those same hierarchies, and actually is there all the time, and that allows people to make much better, much quicker decisions. So what we're seeing is a flattening of that structure and an empowerment down the chain of command, rather than having to go all the way up to get a decision to come all the way back down again. And so we're sort of seeing all that there. So that there are some fundamental changes in there, and dealing with that as an organisation for us, with our long history in that, is not necessarily easy, and there is a lot of significant resistance to that at times, and we've got to. It's how we take that's those softer skills, and how we take those people with us for them to understand what we're doing is actually going to benefit the organisation, and isn't about cost saving and saving jobs. It's about moving people up that value chain, as I said earlier.
Fascinating, really good. Thank you, Mark. And Nisar, over to you, please.
So, kind of in terms of corporate transformation, driver is towards long-term value and service excellence for our customers. We've got long ranges asset as well. Our plans are long-term, certainly not as long as Amelia said 100 years. We look at 20, 25 years. We made a strong commitment towards net zero, and we are driving towards net zero. I don't think any of us really know what would it take, but our commitment is to make it happen and then learn as we go through. And how do we involve customers and community in the way we make decisions? And sometimes as a utility, we assume we know it, but that's not always the case. So how do we pay very serious attention to it in every decision we make? Bring it back to the skill set in terms of people. We have got a blend, so we've got a lot of our own guys in there, and people who kind of are digitally savvy. In fact, the new technology, I believe, have generally democratized digital. It's no longer privy of some tech whiz. With no-code platform, we've got a lot of my operators who are good enough and they could design the app. In fact, my app factory, the guy who currently run, and I'm immensely proud of him, his only qualification is a qualified plumber, but he's brilliant what he does because he's self-learned technology. He gets it inside out. So there is that kind of democratization, because with the new technology coming in. When it comes to skill in our people, the approach we've taken is kind of similar to what you'd say. It is sometimes we assume because some role is not required, people are not required. No, that's not the case. Their commitment to us, their investment in us, their emotional investment, their understanding of my business is absolutely relevant to me. But currently they do X, and that X may not be relevant. So you set up a career transition program to help them transition to a new career, because they as an individual are absolutely relevant to future of my business. It's just some of the skills are now no longer required, and they need new skill, and most folks could learn. So how do we get them on a journey? And therein lies the commitment from transformation perspective. What we want to do is build an enthusiastic commitment of our people. And when I talk about our people, not just people who work for us directly, but even our supply chain, toward a transformed Scottish Water, which is striving towards net zero, which is driving value to our customer, and which is striving to deliver the excellent service it can, be the best in it, but people's enthusiastic emotional commitment to it. And that's what we are driving towards. It's a tough ask and a very difficult, very high bar, but that's what we want to do, build the enthusiastic commitment to future, because once that happens, people are willing to come on a journey. A skill comes and change. If they could do complex engineering, I'm sure they could do a bit of tech as well. That's not difficult if we support them on a journey to learn. But that's where we are as a business.
Fantastic. Really insightful, thank you. And I love the plumber example. That is really brings it to life. It it made me smile, but it's a really a fantastic example. So look, really fascinating insight there. And I was just thinking as you were all talking about how different our organizations are, but how similar a lot of the challenges are and a lot of the plans that we have. And when I think about Atos, we tend to look 2 years ahead. when we look at our skills transformation and the skills for the future. You know, yes, we have a comparison here to 20 to 45-year plans and 100-year plans, but actually, in terms of those immediate challenges, they're very, very similar. You know, we're looking at bringing in our grads, interns, and apprentices in very similar ways to you all. We have a very blended approach to skills acquisition and certainly reskilling and upskilling internally within the organisation. We've got some fantastic examples through our Future Fit programme, which is something, Emily, that we've talked to Sellafield quite a lot about as well. And we've started to look at a new programme called Find Your Fit. So it is all about breaking down those barriers and making people excited about skilling into these new digital spaces. So really, really fascinating. So thank you all. So I'm going to go to questions in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to challenge you all to leave this fantastic audience with some really key points to take away, maybe just a few words of advice from you all that people can remember to take away from this session. So Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot first, if you don't mind.
For me, it's simple. It's about people, process, behaviour and culture. The technology will allow you pretty much to do whatever you want it to do. And we've overly focused on the technology in the past. It's focusing on the much softer side and how you change that, particularly in an organisation like the Army that, you know, as I described, has got a long history, a very traditional organisation, and changing those ways of doing business is probably harder as a result.
Fantastic, really good, thanks. And Nisarg?
Bit more philosophical, but I believe it's needed. How do we maintain curiosity as leaders and as an individual, because we're getting into the world where we don't know answers to, but also retain humbleness, because we'll be wrong more time than right. Which is kind of the PACE answer I gave. We got excited by PACE, we were curious by it, but recognize it might burn people out. So remain humble that we'll be wrong more times than right. But progress would only be achieved if we remain curious and humble about the future and keep on discovering.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm sure that gives people a lot to think about as they go away from today. And Emily?
Well, I don't know how you follow that one, Nisarg. That was fantastic. So I think for me, it would be thinking about digital in the most holistic way possible. I think we're given examples of this being sort of a technical expertise, but also it being just part of people's day-to-day role in the future. So I think if we lose the soft skills and we focus on this too much as a hard skill, then we'll develop some really good experts, but we'll miss some real opportunity. So I would think about it in the broadest sense possible. And I think recognising that from 4 different organisations, we've all got similar challenges, there must be more opportunity for organisations to work together on this. There has to be. So I think the other one would be, let's look for opportunities to collaborate where we can.
Fantastic, very good. Okay, so we have 9 minutes left for questions, and we have a lot of questions. So unfortunately, we're not going to get through them all, but we'll do our best. So if you could be ready, I'll fire some questions at you. Some great questions, actually. I'm just scrolling down. So I'm going to start with a question from Martin O'Brien. So what challenges do you foresee in balancing full digital workplace practices versus a combination of new and old practices, in particular non-direct human interaction meetings compared to online and similarly physical workplace attendance? So Nisarg, would you like to go on that one?
Christ. I think we have adopted a lot of challenges. I think what COVID has shown what is the art of possible with the workplace technology. So if I look at, we are pretty much, in fact, all of the people who are not doing the physical work out in the field are working remotely, right? But we've left a kind of few folks come into office for some other reason, because that is the safest environment for them to be. But that's kind of a fraction, tiny fraction of the workforce as we have. So I don't think that there are any challenges. It's just a question of trialing, learning, and finding the right medium. Because I would be hubris enough to challenge back to say it's not old and new. It's just two different ways. Remote versus not. We're still human, and there's something about human connection and seeing each other in there. But there's a lot of stuff which could be done digitally as well. And we will. I hope in next year or so we'll find a new blend which is appropriate and might last us a few years till the time we learn and find another blend. So I don't see any particular challenges to it. There's certain things for certain businesses which would be around the digital equality because not everyone has it, and that's something we need to be mindful of. Certainly when we talk about customers and remote working. Thankfully, certainly for most of or all of our people, we managed to get the digital infrastructure to the level whereby everyone could connect easily and work through remotely.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to jump to a question from Mary Kirby. So thank you, Mary. How do you think remote working and lack of face-to-face meetings will affect relationships, especially for new joiners into organisations and teams? Emily, would you like to pick that one up?
Yeah, I guess that was saying, I definitely don't think you can underestimate the number of interactions you have and the impact they have for you to understand an organisation's culture. So when I think about new starters particularly, I think that's been one of the things we've been thinking about. Our graduates are due to start in November in a very different environment to where our graduates started last year. So all of our build has been around a virtual platform, but really embedding them into what Sellafield's all about without them being present in a workplace. So I think, I guess a personal reflection on it would be, I think I know my team better now than I knew them before the pandemic. Yeah, I saw them every day before the pandemic. So I guess I don't start from an assumption to say that that face-to-face interaction helps me build rapport with people or know people any better. But I do think there's a place for it, and I definitely see the future as being a blended arrangement rather than one or the other. As I said, don't underestimate what some of those water cooler conversations can do for taking people's learning and thinking forward. So hopefully we'll have both.
Could I just add to that? I think just very quickly that the key word to me in this is trust. Why we were successful through the pandemic is because we built up a level of trust amongst the teams where by working together so closely, and doing that face-to-face meetings, that we were able to easily navigate through that remote working. I think when you bring new teams on or new people on in that remote working environment, how you build that trust is going to be absolutely key.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point. I'm going to jump to a question from Debbie White, and she says, question is, how do we increase resilience and adapt controls to keep pace? It's quite an open question. Anybody want to jump in on that one?
I think resilience is a question of practice, and COVID has certainly given a lot of practice of pace. Because resilience is built. I don't think it's just in it to say certain things as an even organization or as an individual. And certainly COVID has proved that we could be immensely more faster than we've been to date. And practice of working this way, doing this way has given a lot of confidence, where in the new world, people are not going back to the old timeline. We're still not in the new world, but as this becomes just the way of being, the new timelines, which is out of the emergency command and control mode, which kind of Mark seeing in uniform just reminds me of that as well. The new timelines are far smaller than the way it used to be, because people are now practiced at it. That means they build trust in themselves to work this way, and they're running through it. But that's a very, very simple answer.
That's a very good way of looking at it. Thanks, Nisar. I'm going to go to one more question before we close, and this is on the topic of leadership, and this has come up in our discussion today. and the skills that leaders require, certainly in the new age, if you think about the pandemic that we're currently going through, but I think in the future of work with the new skills that we're bringing into the organisation. So Marianne Hewlett from our BTN organisation in Northern Europe has asked which skills will be key for leaders to manage distributed teams, in brackets teams where members are partly in the office and online, and how will you support managers to acquire or improve those skills? Open to anybody if you want to jump in and answer.
Yeah, I think Emily picked up on leadership and management in the earlier discussion, and it has, dispersed working's fundamentally changed those skills that they need. I think, it comes back to that T word, trust, and how you build that with your team. But I think also being comfortable with working on based on outputs and outcomes, not necessarily people sitting at a desk in an office on a day-to-day basis. So it is uncomfortable at times, because you think, well, why is that person not online? What are they doing? But you've got to be able to work within those and give people the right freedom and empowerment and trust again to deliver against what they need to deliver. And you know what? Actually, I found when we've done that, and it's quite a difficult, skill to let people let go a little bit, but actually the workforce have responded really positively. Almost to a person. So I think it's we perhaps probably over managed and over controlled our people in the past, and this is probably stifled some of the innovation and the thinking that they could have done. We've got to get comfortable in that space where we don't have that same level of control. It's a much more flatter structure. It's much more a democracy rather than an autocracy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. Look, we're out of time. We could talk on this topic for hours and hours, I'm sure. So I just want to thank our panelists and experts, certainly our experts with some of those answers, Emily, Nisarg and Mark. So thank you so much, and thanks to everybody in the audience for giving up your time today. I'm sure you learned a huge amount, and I'd invite you to share your thoughts with us on hashtag Digital Society Skills. This event is recorded and it will be available on our website along with others, so on atos.net, so please do look out for that in the coming days. And keep an eye out for Atos Digital Society work and visit atos.net/UK/Digital Society, where you can find out more. So thank you all very much, and hope everybody has a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.